Welcome to the iPad Podcast, a weekly podcast from Mac's Future.
Okay, welcome to the iPad Podcast. This is Lex at Mac's Future, and this is episode 69. And today is Hurricane Sunday. I call it Hurricane Sunday because it's the day that Hurricane Irene hits, New York City and the northeastern cities, and it's August 28th. So this is the Hurricane edition of the iPad Podcast. So let's get to it. Remember, no chit-chat. This is a chit-chat-free podcast. Any positive feedback on any of the places this is distributed in, the iTunes, Blip TV, YouTube, anything like that would be greatly appreciated. So let's get to it. Okay, before we get into news about the iPad, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, as I have on the other podcast that I do, the Apple podcast that comes out on Friday, how significant the news was this week on Wednesday, the 24th, that Steve Jobs submitted a resignation letter as CEO. He is staying on as chairman of the board and as a, quote, employee of Apple. And he basically indicated that, he just is not capable of serving as CEO anymore. And it's sad. It's a sad day. Steve Jobs is obviously the hero behind not only Apple, but the iPad. Obviously, lots of people worked on the iPad, but it's his vision that really created it. And, I started reading this weekend a book that was written in the 1980s originally by Michael Moritz, who is now one of the most prominent venture capital partners at Sequoia Capital, but he was a journalist back in the 1980s, and he wrote a book on Steve Jobs and Wozniak and Apple. And what struck me is in reading that book, which is called Return to the Little Kingdom by Michael Moritz, what struck me is that really how the foundations of what we have today in the iPad go back to 1976 when Apple was formed on April Fool's Day. And what you had was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak creating Apple with the first Apple I computer. And they brought two different things to the Apple I. Steve Wozniak was the engineer who really built the thing, but he had input on which way it would go as a product. And what's significant is that Steve Jobs, he didn't come into Apple and the creation of it as a pure engineer. He had odd internships and jobs in the tech field, but in a way, he's much more well-rounded than the pure geeks like Wozniak or Bill Gates in software. In that, Steve Jobs was a little trying to find himself. He had been adopted, and he went to Reed College, and he dropped out after 6 months at Reed College because it was so expensive, and his parents were blue-collar. But he stayed there and took courses in calligraphy, and he just dabbled in all sorts of stuff. And he comes at it from the more humanist point of view. He obviously was attracted to creating Apple as an enterprise. He was poor. Unlike Steve Gates, who came from a wealthy family, Steve Jobs was essentially poor, lower blue class, adopted family, and they couldn't really afford Reed College, and he'd never had much money. And so it was his entrepreneurial spirit to get ahead in life and to sell something that would be attractive to people and easy to use that, I guess, made him create Apple Computer with Steve Wozniak. He saw what Steve Wozniak was able to do with a computer board that he put together that was sort of unique. But the reason I mention this on the iPad show is because really I truly believe that the iPad is definitely in the path of what he was trying to create. He was trying to create like an appliance that would be easy for anybody to use, and that he could sell a lot of them, and that it would be a quality appliance. And computers have always struggled from the beginning. I mean, it's in 1976, computers were essentially mini-frame computers or mainframe computers, and Atari had put out the first sort of programmable computer, but it was really hard to program. Bill Gates actually dropped out of Harvard to make software for that Atari computer. That was the first, sort of computer. And Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, their Apple computer was seeking to make it easier for everyday people to use a computer, and they succeeded, particularly with the Apple II. And ultimately, the creation of the mouse and the Macintosh were part of the path that Steve Jobs has taken to make highly usable computing devices. And by highly usable, computing devices that anyone can use. And so, we should all thank Steve Jobs. He's not the guy in the laboratory who's actually, making the hardware and the software, but he's the bridge between the engineers and the geeks and the everyday people who aren't geeks, who don't know that they want. And Steve Jobs knows that they will want once he designs something that's appealing to them. And so it's kind of fitting that he ends his run as CEO, his second run as CEO, with the iPad being so dominant and vanquishing a lot of the competition. So, it's a very momentous week with him retiring as CEO, and I really hope, his health holds out, and I hope the best for him because, he's very much inspirational to, I think, a lot of people. His whole story, because it truly is a rags to riches story, but you get the sense from everything that he's done, it's not just about money. It's about, making something that everybody wants and that really transforms the world. So let's get to iPad news, and we'll cover the great device that he has created. So right now, the iPad dominates tablet sales, and who knows what the future will hold. Well, MacRumors.com has a post out on August 24th where it is reporting on information from a research firm named IHS iSupply, which updated projections for tablet sales through 2015. Now, I don't know how they can really make these projections, but the bottom line, if you look on the video version, I can show you the chart that MacRumors is republishing from IHS iSupply. And basically, it shows huge growth in the tablet, and it projects that by 2011, in other words, this year, Apple's projected to ship 44.2 million iPads, which is up 500,000 from this research firm's, I guess, previous estimate. And then it continues to go up, and even in 2013, Apple continues to have a predominant majority of the market share of the tablets, but the whole market grows to, let's see, almost 200 million devices shipped. This research says that by 2015, there'll be over 250 million shipped. But that Apple will have only 43.6% of the market in 2015. So look, I don't know how anybody makes these projections. I guess they're paid to make projections, but how accurate can they be? Look, clearly Apple, is going to sell a lot of iPads, and it's going to grow because I think more and more people are adopting the iPad as a substitute for computers, regular computers, and for people who've never had a regular computer, it's a way to get into computing. Anyways, interesting projections. Okay, so one of the things that's been a running debate in the last few months among people making predictions is, when is the iPad 3 coming out? Well, a lot of people believe that the iPad 3 will have the next generation processor that Apple's going to develop. The current generation processor for the Apple iPad 2 is the A5 processor. The A4 processor first came out with the iPad, the first generation, last year. Well, now word comes that not only will the iPad 3 not be coming out this fall, but it might not come out till next summer. And I don't know what to believe regarding that. And this is what the information is based on. The article in Electronista that came out on Friday, August 26, is entitled Analyst Thinks iPad 3 May Be Stalled by A6 Chip. And the article says that senior analyst Kevin Crewell of the Linley Group asserted in a research note that Apple's A6 processor would be relatively late. Now, I've never heard of Kevin Crewell or the Linley Group, so you have to take this with a grain of salt. They claim to be citing a Taiwan Economic News article that supports their view, and the article believes that the A6 chip won't be in full production until spring at the earliest, and to get into a shipping product would mean the A6 not arrive until at least June. So look, this is highly speculative. Apple is extremely secretive about its production line, its sources, and I can't imagine that Apple is going to want to blow back the annual update of the iPad. On the other hand, Apple did blow back the annual update of the iPhone. The iPhone had been coming out the first and second and third and fourth generation in June. And this year, for the first time, the iPhone 5 isn't coming out now. It hasn't come out in June, and the speculation is it won't come out until September. Now, in reading the history of Apple and Apple's practices, Steve Jobs believes, I guess going back to the first Apple computer and the second Apple computer, that it's better to ship a well-running device than a device with any flaws. So if Apple is having production problems and getting the A6 chip done, I can see Tim Cook, who's now the CEO of Apple, deciding that the iPad 3 isn't going to come out till this summer. So on the other hand, Apple has such a huge lead with the iPad that maybe it doesn't feel pressured to have a firm March or April deadline to come out with the iPad 3. So anyways, look, if you don't have an iPad and are really interested in getting one, get one now. Okay, it's not worth holding out for the iPad 3. And here's the beauty is if you buy the iPad 2, you can sell it. These things sell. You get a decent return on your initial purchase. They don't sell for nothing. They're sold at a little bit of a discount, but there's a ready market in used iPads. So you can get it, and then when the iPad 3 comes, you can sell your iPad 2 and buy the iPad 3. Now, with the Hewlett-Packard TouchPad essentially vanquished, you'd think the iPad competitors would have had enough, but I guess Toshiba hasn't listened, because there's a story out in electronista.com on August 27th, Saturday, that says that Toshiba plans a metal-bound Android tablet that is thinner to make up for the Thrive. Now, Toshiba released an Android tablet called the Thrive, and I played around with it at Costco, and it was terrible. It felt terrible. And word comes now in this article that Toshiba plans to make up for many of the mistakes it made with the Thrive through a much improved model uncovered in an Italian leak. And it says that the new version of the Thrive would scrap the thick and heavy rubberized design for a much thinner brushed metal design, and expansion would still be a focus, with the Toshiba, the new tablet from Toshiba, having a micro HDMI connector, a micro USB connector, and a micro SD to get similar features. And they're saying it may even show at some, show in September 1st. So obviously, look, Toshiba, whoever's making Android devices or any tablet to compete with the iPad, has to compete with the current iPad 2, and has to compete in one or two ways. It has to either severely undercut the price of the tablet that's comparing with the iPad 2. The TouchPad, after HP abandoned it, was being liquidated at $99, and people were snapping it up at $99. People were not snapping it up when it was $500 and the same price as the iPad 2. But if someone comes up with a somewhat decent, light, tablet that's $100, then I could see people buying it. But here's the thing: you can't make a $100 tablet that has all the features and quality of the iPad 2. So what do you have to do? You have to do something that's stripped down, and actually Amazon has done that. The Kindle is a tablet. The Kindle sells for $130. It has a 6-point-whatever-inch diagonal, and it has a black and white screen with no touch capacity. It's very limited. It's really there just for reading, and it's very light. And at $130, people are buying it because it's cheap and it's good for reading. But there's been rumors that Amazon's going to come up with a Android Kindle tablet that could compete in some ways with the iPad. Now, I think what Amazon's going to do is have an Android device which is very limited and very cheap and has the Kindle content in there and can do some limited things, and that's a lot cheaper than the iPad. So that's the only way that anyone's going to compete. The only way someone can compete with Apple on price at $500 and sell something at between $500 and $800 if they make something that's superior to the iPad. And I think that's very, very hard to do because Apple's pushing the envelope in terms of battery life, in terms of software ecosystem for the iPad, and for processor power. Now, competitors can stuff processor power into their tablets, but it's hard for them to make it thin, light, beautiful, and with a huge ecosystem. So good luck, Toshiba. Good luck, competitors. I don't really see anyone catching up with Apple for a while in terms of tablets. Now, even when you make a tablet that might be able to compete with Apple, you got to be careful not to make it look too much like the iPad. And as you may have heard, Apple's been in lawsuits, in particular with Samsung, which makes the Galaxy Tab, and smartphones that are like the iPhone. Well, word came in the New York Times on August 25th that a judge in Dusseldorf, Germany, said Thursday that Apple's intellectual property rights are probably strong enough to ban sales of Samsung Electronics' rival Galaxy 10.1 tablet computers in Germany. The article, though, says that the court is unlikely to expand the ban beyond Germany to other European countries, as Apple had sought in a preliminary assessment, and a ruling is scheduled for September 9th. And this is what the judge said at the hearing. He said, quote, there are a lot of alternative ways to design a tablet device, as the market amply shows, the judge said at a hearing. Quote, we think Apple's European Union design rights grant a medium range of protection, if not a broad one, end quote. So this is, a big score for Apple, because Samsung in particular, both in the smartphone market and in the tablet market, just like to copy the look and feel of the design and make them very similar to the iPhone and the iPad. And there are ways to make them different, and that's what Samsung has to do. So we'll see how these lawsuits go, but Apple's competing both in protecting its intellectual property and also turning out a great product. Okay, so one of the stupidest articles I read about the iPad and its competition comes from Cnet's Brooke Crothers. He had an article out on Saturday, August 27th that said, I guess he's just trying to get views, and he says the title is iPad Met Its Match in a TouchPad. Now that's a crazy title, isn't it? Because essentially last week, Hewlett-Packard announced that it's no longer going to be making touchpads, and that it's at best going to be licensing out WebOS, the operating system, to competitors. So Brooke Crothers has a very strange article here. He says, he says that, well, he's basically saying that because the touchpad was sold at a frenzy at $99, it provides a roadmap to competitors of Apple to compete with Apple. And that's a little crazy because there's no way anybody can create like a touchpad at $99 without losing lots of money. And I don't see how anybody is just going to like take the chance of giving away a product at a significant loss to get a market out there. What are you going to do later on? Raise the price of these things? So it's kind of crazy to say that Apple met its match because there was a fire sale of its competitors' products. It's the most counterintuitive argument I've seen. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, so speaking of competitors like to undercut the iPad, Boy Genius Report, a website, was reporting on something that the New York Post, which is not particularly a very reliable newspaper, reported on Thursday. And it had a report that Amazon will soon reveal its Android tablet, which will launch for hundreds of dollars less than the Apple's $499 entry-level iPad 2. And what Boy Genius Report says, according to the report, which cites an anonymous source, Amazon will launch its first Android tablet in September or October, and aggressive pricing is seen as crucial to Amazon's success in the space. And it says that Amazon is working on 2 tablet devices, the entry-level dual-core Coyote, codenamed Coyote, and the high-end quad-core Hollywood. And at least one of them is expected to be unveiled in the coming weeks. And it goes on to say Amazon's tablet offerings will reportedly feature the Android operating system, perhaps heavily customized, along with deep integration of several Amazon services such as Amazon App Store, the Kindle ebook, Amazon's Cloud Drive, etc. Well, look, I could see Amazon making a $300 tablet that is going to have a much smaller screen and have limited resources in it. And Amazon could make it cheap and give up a lot of profits, because if you look at Amazon, and I've always think, Amazon's not a great company. I know customers like Amazon, but if you ever look at Amazon's financial results, it hardly makes any profit on its business relative to all the revenue that it's bringing in. Apple and Google, well, Google until now, were essentially making over 30 cents on each dollar of merchandise or services sold. Amazon, makes like a buck or $2. I'm sorry, only makes 1% or 2%, 2 cents on every dollar sold. And so Amazon's model seems to be, look, they just want to have as many customers and not really care about making too much profit. So I could see Amazon really low pricing an Android tablet. But again, unless its performance is as zippy and powerful as the iPad, I just don't see it being a real competitor. Let Amazon, sell, Kindles without really making a profit. That's not a really sustainable business model. Okay, so one of the craziest things I've read this week is an article or a series of articles that reported on an argument that Samsung is making in defending its Galaxy Tab against the iPad, I guess in the European or in the Northern District of California. And basically, one of the defenses you could make, I guess, to trade dress violations or patent violations, I'm not an intellectual property expert here, is that there is prior art. In other words, that other people, were thinking about your device or the concept of your device or showing it in some way long before you came out with it. So Samsung is arguing, they attached as Exhibit D to a brief, a true and correct copy of a still image taken from Stanley Kubrick's 1968 film 2001. And they claim in the clip, 2 astronauts are eating at the same time using personal tablet computers. The clip can be downloaded online, and they give the YouTube address. And they claim that because it looks like there's some sort of some sort of tablet, that the astronauts are using in 2001, that it is a prior art. But the thing is, when you look at the picture, it's like a screen. And first of all, they're not using their fingers. It looks like they're using like pencils or pens. So it really doesn't look like a tablet. We could take a short look at the video just to confirm that. Okay, so here is the clip from YouTube, and it shows like these two, I guess, scientists or whatever, astronauts in 2001. They're eating their meal on some sort of like desk, and to the side of them they have like a screen, like a rectangular screen. And I don't know. I mean, that's all you have. It looks like a TV. They're not picking it up. They're not touching it with their finger. It's just it looks just like I don't know, like a TV screen at an angle. They're not moving it around. I mean, it could just be a screen viewing device. So this clip doesn't really, to me, confirm that Stanley Kubrick in 2001 showed an iPad. He basically showed, people looking at some sort of video device, like a TV. So, very lame effort by Samsung. Now, the reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, a famous movie from 1968 about science fiction in the future, leads one to wonder, what is the iPad? Is it a personal computer? Well, Ars Technica, an incredibly well-read, I guess I would say tech magazine or tech blog, has a really good article by a guy named Ken Fisher that was published this week entitled "The iPad, Is It a Personal Computer? True or False?" And he basically thinks it is, more like a personal computer. And he makes the point, you have to really understand the history of computing. And he makes the point, look, we had, at the time that Steve Jobs and Wozniak were creating Apple Computer, there were like mini frame computers. There were big computers, were these big boxes, like took up a whole room in like the 50s and 60s, and you used cards with holes in them to program them. And then DEC computing and digital computing came out with mini frame computers. They were still mainframe computers, but smaller, but that you couldn't put them in your home. And he basically thinks that, look, that the iPad is a continuation on something being a true PC. So he says he views the PC as an expression of technological development modeled after the microcomputer, not as a strict category of PC-compatible architecture. So the author goes on to say, in hindsight, I consider the TRS-80 MC10 and the iMac to be PCs. Some would argue that the TRS-80 is a microcomputer but not a PC, and the iMac is an Apple microcomputer, not a PC. But I would respond that a PC is all about using centralized computing power in a non-institutional environment with open-ended possibilities thanks to software. So he says, I consider the iPad a PC because, in his view, a PC, personal computer, is just that, a personal computing device. And he goes on and says, in my big sky view, the PC is best understood as bundled trajectory of technologies, of which the iPad is a significant plot point in the development of mobile computing. That is to say, and this is the author speaking, I view iPads in the same vein as laptops, believing that for 98% of the world, the iPad is equivalent to a laptop in terms of intended uses. When we fast forward 15 years, I expect that today's laptop will seem almost antiquated to us, having been replaced by tablet-based devices. I do not think home PC will feel quite so antiquated. So I think he makes a very good argument. He points out that many people can and will argue that tablets are not PCs. And he goes on to say some of the usual arguments are that real PCs require real keyboards, real PCs have preemptive multitasking, real PCs can be directly programmed at their own consoles, real PCs requiring open architecture and open operating environments. And he says, look, the first two arguments are red herrings. He says the first PCs didn't multitask at all, and multitasking cannot be an essential part of the definition of a PC. And that's right. When the first Apple I came out and Apple II, I mean, these were not very powerful devices, so they couldn't multitask. So how can, and they were said to be the first PCs. And then he goes on, he says, I can't figure out why a real keyboard is somehow different from a virtual keyboard. The latter two issues, however, are more interesting to consider. When we write the history of the PC revolution, will it be limited to fully user programmable devices? Should it be? Should the PC be something only made in a multi-vendor environment? So, I agree with a lot of his view. I think the people who are against the iPad are people who are just wedded to the current incarnation of the desktop PC or the laptop. And so they're not looking at it in terms of the history of personal computers, which go back to the Apple I, to the original IBM PC. And what made them personal computers were that anyone could buy them. You didn't have to have a lot of room. You didn't have to have a whole living room used up to put a mainframe computer in there. And they were cheap enough that everyday people could buy them. And they were very limited. And remember, the original PCs didn't have a mouse. Apple invented the mouse. And so there was a lot of things that weren't sort of standard. You had very limited memory. You couldn't multitask. Depending on who made them, you could plug in things or you could not plug in things. So this is a really good article to read. I have a link to the blog links that I put when I posted on the MaxFuture.com website when I post the podcast there. And check it out. Ars Technica, really good site to read. Okay, so some news that came out, I guess, on Friday that affects the iPad, because the iPad has iTunes on it, and that is Apple has quietly dropped 99-cent TV show rentals from iTunes. And, that's the thing where you pay only 99 cents and you can rent it. And I think you have to watch it I think, like within 24 hours after you start it or something like that. Now, look, that's a bummer, but I don't think this means it's over for the concept that Apple will eventually have a subscription service. And, some people are saying this means that Apple will not come out with a subscription service for TV shows or movies. Now, what is a subscription service? Well, Netflix, as you know, if you have Netflix on your iPad, is a wonderful subscription service. You pay like $8 a month, and you can watch unlimited movies and TV shows that are in the Netflix library. And a lot of people are hoping that Apple will go that route. Now, some people are saying that because Apple dropped the 99-cent TV show rental, that they're not going that route. I actually think you could make the counter argument. You could argue that maybe Apple is going to come out with a subscription rental, so it doesn't really make sense to have this other model of 99-cent rentals. So we'll have to see, but Apple clearly wants to compete in this field of providing TV and movie content to Apple devices. And I think actually Apple has to, because look, if Amazon comes out with an Android tablet that has all this content, Apple doesn't want to, has to compete in terms of content. What if Amazon cut off the Kindle from the iPad? That's why Apple has to have iBooks, to make sure that if someone cuts off content from its devices, that it can still provide that content, because content is also what helps sell the hardware. Now, iPod NN, which I was looking at for this story, says there's an official explanation. And it says here that the Apple TV product page no longer makes mention of the rental option, and rentals are now limited to movies, and TV shows are back to being purchase only. And so they're saying that the changes could have been because ABC and Fox have soured on the deal, either due to results or contractual differences. And so it could be that the content providers don't want Apple to sell the TV shows for 99 cents. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But I truly think Apple's going to try to go to a subscription service. So let's cross our fingers. Okay, so the efforts to jailbreak the iPad and other iOS devices may have been subject to a setback. And so what is that setback? Did Apple sue someone who's jailbreaking the iPad or the iPhone? No. Did Apple create some sort of impenetrable security block? No. The news is, though, that Apple hired as a intern Comex. Comex is a 19-year-old kid who named Nicholas Allegra, who I guess attends Brown University and lives in Chappaqua, New York, and he was behind some of the best ways to jailbreak the iPad and the iPhone. He came up earlier this year with that incredible PDF vulnerability where you could go to a website with your iPad and that would jailbreak a certain version of the operating system. And somebody pointed out after he went by the name Comex, Comex, and obviously the guy is really smart because he figured out vulnerabilities that Apple's constantly trying to patch in these iPhone and iPad devices, and he figured out a way to jailbreak it. Well, the Forbes article that outed him ended by wondering, and this is reported on MacRumors, the article wondered if Apple's security team should hire him as an intern. And it turns out Apple did that. Apple has hired him as an intern, and he tweeted the news, Comex, and he said, "It's been really, really fun, but it's also been a while, and I've been getting bored. So the week after next, I will be starting an internship with Apple." Now, that says a lot about Apple here because, they could take the view that we're never going to hire anyone who's a jailbreaker. But here they went out and they hired a kid. And I think, if you think about it, Apple's early roots, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, they were hackers themselves. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the two founders of Apple, long before they created Apple, they had a business making blue boxes, which were these little, I guess, illegal devices where you could hack AT&T's telephone service back in the early 70s and make free calls to around the world or anywhere you want. And they would make these little blue boxes, and it was called phone phreaking back then. And so there's a little bit of the jailbreaker in Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And so I think it really speaks volumes for Apple that they would hire him. Some other corporations would be so conservative and buttoned up. They would never hire hackers or jailbreakers. And look at Sony. Sony sued this other hacker, this other jailbreaker who hacked the PlayStation. So kudos to Apple, and who knows, maybe 20 years from now, Comex, Nicholas Allegra, maybe he'll be the new CEO of Apple 20 years from now. Wouldn't that be funny? Okay, so now every week I seem to mention how the iPad's being used in enterprise, and one of the more colorful stories I read on GottaBeMobile.com in that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a professional football team, has issued Apple iPad 2s to the entire team, and that's going to be their new Playbook, and it's going to also store game film, and it's normally, distributed on disk, and now it's going to be distributed on the iPad, and it's going to have the Playbook. So, this is really a trend that we're seeing. We're seeing how some airlines are giving all the pilots the iPad because it's a very great way to store that whole flight book. And so now you're seeing a whole football team. Now, this article says that other football teams aren't following as quickly. So one person the team safety said the following. He said, "It's crazy how much technology has changed the game," said the team safety, Cody Grimm. He explained how teams used to sit around a film projector in a dark room watching film of their past games and next opponent. He goes on to say, "Stuff that we used to come here to see, we can sit on our couch at home and have access to 24/7. It's awesome." So, I bet you within a year or two we're going to see iPads on the sidelines. I think we're going to have fans holding iPads, the players having iPads, the announcers having iPads. Essentially, everyone's going to be having an iPad at a football game. Okay, so Logitech has come into the keyboard Bluetooth game for the iPad, and I'm looking at a site called Zdnet that reports on it, and basically they've come out with something called Logitech's iPad 2 Bluetooth fold-up keyboard, and it does look very different. It's basically an ultra-slim mini Bluetooth keyboard, but you can sort of fold it up. It has a foldable case stand and separate keyboard. So it's sort of, the keyboard sort of splits in two and folds up. When it's unfolded, according to this review, the keyboard tucks neatly underneath your iPad 2 and clamps onto the edges of your device. And it says to turn your iPad 2 into a mini laptop, gently pull the two sides of the keyboard from underneath the device towards the center of your display in landscape mode until the keyboard snap into place. In doing so, it will also prop up the iPad 2 at the same time. And it's powered by an internal rechargeable battery, and it also comes with its own USB cord for recharging. And I guess the writer here, Gloria Sin, was impressed. It goes, though, for a whopping $129.99. I mean, that's really expensive. The reviewer said the unfolding process was rather noisy, with the moving keys and parts clacking away until everything was in place. So it's not to stand to whip out when you're late to a lecture hall or meeting. You've been warned. Again, it connects by Bluetooth. I actually think it looks too clunky, and will probably add significant weight to your iPad. Honestly, you know what you should do, folks? Just get a standard Bluetooth keyboard from Apple. It's like $69. They're beautifully designed. They're incredibly light. And for me, they're easy to carry. They look beautiful. They have a really good keyboard, because you know they have a good keyboard because people use them with their iMacs. And they're so light. I have one with my iMac, and I bought a second one for the iPad, and I just keep it at my office, if I want to use the iPad at my office. But if I want to use it when going somewhere remotely, I just pack the keyboard into a bag with the iPad, because I carry the iPad in a bag. I don't just carry it with nothing else. And I just put the keyboard in that. I don't like these sort of connected cases with keyboards, because frankly, it adds so much weight that you might as well buy a MacBook Air, it seems, if you wanted to go that route. Okay, so one of the most popular free apps on the iPad is Flipboard. This is the social media magazine app, where you can subscribe as almost like a magazine, your Twitter feed, to your Facebook feed, and also various news feeds. Well, apparently the services that Flipboard provides are going to quickly expand. The Telegraph, a British newspaper, reports that Flipboard is going to soon have add films and TV shows to the feeds. So, that's good news, because obviously it's going to be competing with other sort of social aggregating sites, like Stumble Upon, and there's others that allow you to get movie content. So it's all sort of blurring the sort of social media and subscription stuff. You've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you got Google Plus. So it basically says, according to Reuters report, the company has received $60.5 million funding from a range of investors, including Hollywood actor Ashton Kutcher, and they're going to seek to sign up publishers And also they're thinking of selling ebooks on Flipboard. So prepare for Flipboard to evolve into having all sorts of content on it, not just news feeds and Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds. So we'll have to see. I'm sure there'll be a lot of announcements in the coming weeks and months. Okay, so if you're thinking of getting a stylus with your iPad, you should check out an article I found on Cult of Mac. Cult of Mac is a very good Apple-related or Apple-covering website, and the article is by Ellie Milchman. I have a link to it on my blog. The article is entitled Scrawler Brawler iPad Capacitive Stylus Showdown, Review Showdown. And basically the writer reviewed 6 different styluses and gives an overview of them. And the 6 are the Griffin stylus, the Targus stylus, the Adonit Jot, the Adonit Jot Pro, the Wacom Bamboo stylus, the Radtech Steroid Plus. So I'll tell you, I have the Griffin stylus. They listed here for $20. I got it for $15 at J&R. And they only gave, so they rate them by stars. So they only gave the Griffin stylus 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, I like it. They write, doesn't really distinguish itself in any way, in any one way, and could, I suppose, serve as a sort of benchmark for other stylists. They say its conductive foam tip has a more squishy, rubbery feel compared to the rest, making it somewhat unsatisfactory. They like the Targus stylus for $15. They gave it 4.5 stars. They say this guy's are a budget-minded favorite and has the best feeling of the bunch. It may be the least charismatic of the group, though. Let's see, what else do they like? They gave 5 stars to a stylus I never heard of called the Adonit Jot, and the Adonit Jot Pro, which is more money, they gave it 4 stars. So they say that the Adonit Jot are the upstarts here. They say they're the creation of Washington-based Kickstarter-funded Adonit, and they're very different than the rest in both aesthetics and approach. Instead of using capacitive foam, as almost all the other capacitive styli do, the Jots use what looks like a ballpoint pen tip attached to a plastic disc. The upshot that it really provides the feeling of writing with a ballpoint pen, and you can actually see under the pen tip, which greatly enhances accuracy and works superbly when used for drawing. And they also say they're also beautifully machined from aluminum in a range of brighter, understated colors with an anodized finish that looks and feels fantastic. And it goes for $20. Now the Pro, which goes for $30, has more pro-looking colors, comes with memory foam wrapped shaft, and a magnet which allows attachment to an iPad 2. They also have the Bamboo stylus, which they say is as handsome as the Jots, and that costs, I guess, retail $30. And they only gave 3 out of 5 stars to Radtech's Stylus Plus 15. Now, I'm intrigued by the Adonit Jot. Now, if you go to the webpage of the Adonit Jot, you look at it, it does look very different. Instead of having like sort of like a stub nose to the stylus pen, it's got like a ballpoint pen like ending, but like a little flat disc that's clear. So it's a little weird, but it seems to have gotten a good review. So it says here you hold your stylus at the angle you're most comfortable with. Jot gives you the freedom to write or sketch like you used to. So I may get one of these and let you know what they're like. They're definitely very different. And it's by Kickstarter, which is sort of like a website where you can ask people to give you money and you'll make something and give them first dibs. Right now, it looks like you have to pre-order it, as the Jot went out to people who initially invested in it. So it's definitely one of the most innovative ones. I'll be honest with you, the Griffin one is only $15, and I like it. If you go to the Adonit Jot, it takes 4 weeks to get one here. They come in different colors: green, purple, red, gunmetal, silver, and turquoise. And the regular Jot is $20 and the Jot Pro is $30. So interesting. I may order one and see what it's like. Okay, so let's go to some interesting apps. One app is a note-taking app, and there's been a number of note-taking apps, and this is a newer one. It's called 7 Notes HD. There's also a premium version that costs, how much does it cost? Like, I guess, $9 or so, or something like that. But so what does this have? What's different about this is there's a free version, and if you like the free version, you can buy the paid version. Now, there are some other apps that do a lot of this. One great app that I've used before is Note Taker HD, and that's really good, but there's not a free version. You have to buy a paid version of that. Now, this one lets you play with the free version, and the free version essentially allows you to take handwriting notes and allows you to also type into it. And you can add pictures and stuff like that. You can export to PDF. The premium version will convert Word, your handwriting, to digital fonts anytime. So it converts your handwriting. And we've seen that with other apps. So let's just take a quick, look at what the app looks like. It looks pretty decent. Definitely check out the free version. It's a good free note-taking app. Okay, so 7 Notes HD, the free version, I have here in what I call my business app folder. And it has a lot of the qualities of Note Taker HD and also some of the qualities of WritePad. So let's launch it. So 7 Notes HD. Let's create a new. It's the layout when you come. There's a welcome area that sort of teaches you how to use it. But let's get to the key buttons on the top left. A common thing we see is if you want to create a new document, you click No. You get a choice of 1-column document, 2-column document, 3-column document, or duplicate and edit a current one. So let's create a 2-column document. And I've got this in landscape mode. And so basically, if you want to select your left-hand column, which is narrow, you press on it. And if you double-click on it, you get the keyboard. Now, when you get the keyboard, there's a little squiggly thing that, so you have a choice of writing by hand or use a stylus or use the keyboard. What I like is you can quickly switch between the two. There's a button. It's in some ways Note Taker HD. Note Taker HD, which is, I guess, a competing application, has incredible features. This thing is much simpler and straightforward, but what I like about it is you can both type and handwrite. So I'm going to write, today is Sunday. The thing is, it doesn't automatically, when you write by hand, input into the area you want. You have to press enter, and then it sticks it right in there. Now you can also switch in the same spot to typewriting, and I can press return, go to the next line, and when you type, it does go in there directly. This is Sunday. And press return. So, it has a lot of features. I guess if you wanted to add pictures, you can do that. Let's see, the menu adds a unit, so I can add a unit. I can add an image unit, and let's see, direction. And here we go. I'm going to add a screenshot that I did. So here's a screenshot I had of the picture Apple surpasses Exxon. So you can add units. It's just not, you can't drag and drop the units, it seems. Let's see, in edit mode you can do stuff. So it's very interesting. You can also export. What I like about the export is you can send to an application. And so applications that let's say if you get a choice if you want to send to an application as a text focused unit, as a PDF, as an image, or as a 7-note document. Now, PDF is very common. If I select that, it shows me what applications I can import a PDF in. So Note Taker HD is there, Evernote, Exhibit A, Goodreader, Sundread, Dropbox, iBooks. So that's a very good feature. You can also send by email. You can send it to Twitter. You can send it to Facebook. You can save it to the photo album. You can preview a PDF. And you can print. And you can change the title. So the one thing that, I have to get used to is the adding units. It just doesn't seem to drag it. Let's try to add a text unit. Select direction. I can do top, and I put it at the top. Oh, I see, based on where you selected. So anyways, look, so what the premium version offers, which I think is just a couple of bucks, it just offers the ability to turn into text your handwriting, which is something other programs can do, but this has it in there all in one. Okay, yeah, the premium version of 7Notes HD Premium is $8.99. And let's see, it basically says that it just turns your text into handwriting recognition. So I don't know. I would experiment with the free version. I don't know how well the handwriting recognition works. So check it out. It's called 7Notes HD. Okay, so another app you might want to check out that's free is called Cnet Movies 2 HD by ScreenLife LLC, and it's a free app. But let me warn you of something. It's massive in size. It's 865 megabytes. So if you only have, let's say, a 16 gigabyte iPad, this is going to take up more than almost 1/16 of your entire storage. But what it does is pretty interesting, and it's basically a movie game. And so this is the description. It says, Cnet Movie 2 HD is the latest edition of the trivia game filled with the films you love. Cnet Movies 2 HD represents the next generation of puzzle trivia apps featuring a brand new gameplay that delivers a dynamic quiz experience shaped by your category sections and performances. So you can choose from a wide selection of movie genres and categories. You can expand the game with downloadable trivia packs. You have quizzes, and you can share the screen with AirPlay, and so you can use it at parties. Now, that would be kind of cool. Let's say you're all around in the living room. Someone could start the game up and play it on the big screen, and it would be a sort of a common game context. Now, what I'm noticing, a lot of these free games, more and more, the way they're making money is selling in-app purchases, which is kind of funny because there's that crazy patent troll, Lodsys, that is suing people for having in-app sales. So they have like 99-cent in-app purchases, but the initial version of this program is free. So my only hesitation now is that it's massive in size. But it looks like a cool movie game, and it works with Game Center. So if you have Game Center friends on iPad, it'll work with that. So check it out. It's called Cnet Movies 2 HD. Okay, so if you're interested in games for the iPad, it seems that games are some of the top free apps in the App Store. And this week, they seem to be dominating the free app category. For example, the number one free app is Fragger HD. Okay, Skype then is number 2. It's not a game. Then there's USA Basketball HD, which is it's a game also. Then Royal Envoy HD, that's a game. That's number 4. Then the Weather Channel, obviously because of the hurricane, made number 5. And then we have Mr. Giggle 2 HD Lite, and then Calculator Pro, which is a utility. So out of the top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the top 10 are games. Now, I took a look at Fragger HD. I installed it. It's it's a pretty big file size. So it's 315 megabytes. And I played around with it. And this was on the iPhone, and now there's a Fragger HD version, and it works with Game Center. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so if you've never played Fragger HD, it's a lot like Angry Birds, the famous game where you sling these birds. And so let's take a look at Fragger. It's very similar. I would say they're almost not, I don't think it's the same people making it, but it seems to be almost a knockoff. The only difference here, I'm on to level 2. It's a free game. I think if you want to go to higher levels, there's an in-app purchase, but the initial levels are free. But it's just like Angry Birds, where you got to destroy these birds, and you sling. In Angry Birds, you sling like these little bombs with a slingshot and hit these like pigs. The birds are killing these like piggies. And in Fragger, instead of slinging, it's the same concept. You're sort of using angles and gravity to figure out how you're going to throw. But here you've got like these little soldiers throwing grenades, and fragging, I guess, in the military is when you like killed your, I guess, commanding officer in combat. And here you're trying to kill these people by throwing a grenade. And the way it works is you, with your finger, you aim the angle you want the grenade to be thrown, and you get an arrow, and you can then slide your finger back. That means you want less force when you throw it. If you go to the end of the arrow, you can have more force. And we've seen this with the golfing game I've shown before. And so it's the same thing. You've got like obstacles. It's so similar to Angry Birds. It just seems to just be a different, just a different method and different characters. You've got the same thing with the sound effects and people giggling and stuff like that, and the explosions. So I don't know. It's just, if you're sick of Angry Birds and you just want a sort of a different setting, this is, one way to do it. It's a little, I don't know. To me, it's very derivative of Angry Birds, but it's free. So if you're looking for another free game, this is it. The only difference is I believe there's in-app purchases if you want to go to higher levels. Okay, so let's end this day, Hurricane Day, on a humorous note involving the iPad. And there's a story out on Cnet entitled "iPad Bridesmaid Attends Wedding Via FaceTime." So FaceTime's that video conferencing technology that all iOS devices have that can also communicate with a Macintosh. And there's a story here on August 25th on Cnet, and it basically says that a bridesmaid named Renee Armstrong was 1,500 miles away in Richmond, Virginia, but still got dressed up and appeared in her best friend's wedding party via an iPad and FaceTime. And it says here, quote, "Unfortunately, the economy sucks. She didn't have the means to make it out to Denver. It was absolutely devastating when we found out she couldn't come," end quote, the bride told Cnet. And so as she sat around mulling over her options, the iPad idea came up. And a groomsman, and there's a picture here of the groomsman holding a picture of the bridesmaid, carried Armstrong's virtual presence down the aisle, the article says, and she had a front row seat to the vows. And there's a quote here that says, "I got all teary-eyed during the ceremony, and I couldn't have got that from pictures," end quote, says the virtual bridesmaid in a video shot by wedding attendee Jamie Goswick. So this is pretty wild. There's a video here showing like the bridesmaid, coming out being held by a groomsman. It's really interesting. Are we going to have, it's the iPad and FaceTime going to create virtual presences? Are we going to have conferences where someone holds your iPad and you can participate in things like that? So this is pretty amazing. I mean, they're showing the wedding here, and basically, one of the groomsmen is holding the iPad with the bridesmaid in it and walking around. I don't think this is a stunt. I think this is the real thing. So it's pretty cool, and it's one way to communicate. So look, the iPad has all sorts of incredible utility. Now, sure, you could have done this with a laptop, but doesn't the iPad look much cooler? It's not as obtrusive. And anyways, congratulations to the couple. So here's a creative way to use the iPad. All right, thanks for listening to episode 69 of the iPad podcast. This is Lex at maxfuture.com. Please check out the video version of this podcast on Apple Things on the iTunes or on Blip TV under the Max Future channel, or on YouTube on the Max Future channel. Also, check out the Apple Podcast that comes out every Friday, on iTunes, also on the same video screen capture versions on those other services. And again, you can support this podcast by just giving it a positive review and positive comments on iTunes so other people know that it's worthwhile. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll try to continue with this chit-chat free podcast involving all things iPad. Thanks for listening.